Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel where today we are doing a full-length non-spoilery review of The Empress of Salt and Fortune by Nghi Vo. So this is an adult fantasy novella, and we are following a young royal by the name of Nghi Vo as she is sent south to marry the emperor. She is from the north, and the north got absolutely ravaged, and so she is supposed to marry him to kind of unite the lands. When she gets there, she ends up more or less befriending one of her handmaidens by the name of Rabbit, and she also decides to plot her revenge. And the story goes from there. So let's go ahead and jump right into talking about the world building. Now, like I said, this is a novella. It is only 118 pages, so there's not a ton of room to do really in-depth world building. But what I thought that Nghi Vo chose out some really good details that painted this very vivid picture. So we just got little bits and pieces of everything from culture to like the social standing to the setting, everything. So we never really truly understand everything that's going on because we don't have the time to go into that kind of depth. But we do get a surface level understanding of a good chunk of things. And like I said, the details that were picked out were just very, very vivid. So I walked away from this story feeling like I had a good sense of the world that Nghi Vo lives in. And I think that that's incredibly tricky to do in a novella. And so I was very pleasantly surprised that it was so well done. So next up, let's talk a little bit about the characters. So obviously Nghi Vo is one of our main characters. She is the Empress. She is the one that is plotting her revenge. And I thought that she was fine. Now, even though she's ostensibly one of the main characters, she's actually not the most important main character, even though this is her story. Because this is a book that is actually set in the future after everything has kind of gone down with what Nghi Vo is trying to do. And so we're actually finding out about Nghi Vo's story through Rabbit's recollections about what happened, all of her memories. And so we actually find out quite a bit about Rabbit because Rabbit was very young when she became a handmaiden to the Empress. And um, and so like she grows up more or less with the Empress. And because she is the one that's telling these stories, everything is through her perspective. And so it's what she remembers and how she remembers it. And so we do end up getting to know Rabbit pretty well. The other main character is Chi, and Chi is a cleric in this future setting who is documenting the contents of the house that Nghi Vo ended up exiled to. And so they are documenting everything and interacting with Rabbit as an older woman, old lady, um, and and being basically the person that is on the receiving end of all of Rabbit's memories. I ended up loving Chi, by the way. I just really liked their hunger. They really had a hunger for knowledge without being overwhelming. Like they really understood that sometimes you learn things and it doesn't quite click until later. And I really just, I don't know, something about that really resonated with me, and I just really enjoyed their character. I also really loved watching Chi and Rabbit interact. I thought that their interactions were just generally great because Chi is a young adult, like not middle age, obviously not middle age, and not really teenager, I don't think. They couldn't be a teenager. So somebody probably in their 20s or 30s. While Rabbit is, she calls Rabbit grandmother. So old enough to be called grandmother without Rabbit having any problems with this. So I really just kind of enjoyed watching this dynamic between this 20, 30-year-old person and this grandmother who is, remembering what happened in this past that maybe they haven't talked about before. And I thought that that dynamic was awesome. So next we're going to talk about the structure, because the structure of this is really what makes this novella interesting. So the majority of chapters start out with an inventory of objects that she is recording for their what they're doing. Basically, it'll be an excerpt from Chi's inventory, and then we see a short scene between Rabbit and Chi as they discuss the objects, and then we see Rabbit's memories about these objects in this house and how they were important, or like what um how the people who lived in this house interacted with them. And through these memories about these objects, we find out more of this overarching revenge plot, because it's kind of, sometimes it's on like an aside, a small details that are added, but most of the time it is also just like, oh, this happened to be part of Inyo's plan for revenge. And I thought that that was really, really interesting. It really means that this story unfolds in its own time, and you're just kind of pulled along for the ride. And I found that to be incredibly compelling. I absolutely adore how this particular story is told, because it makes the plot very interesting. So let's talk about that plot. Because when you pull back, when you've read it and you pull back, you recognize that actually it's a fairly straightforward revenge plot, right? Like in the beginning, we see kind of what caused Inyo to really want this revenge, and all the way to the end where there's the aftermath. But the interesting part about it is that we're not seeing all of the little details along the way. We're just getting little windows into interesting moments, interesting details from Rabbit's stories about these objects. And so they're like little windows along the timeline. And it just really, I don't know, it really it made this very straightforward plot just incredibly interesting. Now, that does mean that we don't get a ton of details about exactly how everything was handled. Like, we do get some details sometimes. Although I will say my biggest problem with this book was just that occasionally some of those details didn't quite make sense. Like, they were glossed over to the point where I was just like, this, like, I'm going to assume that it fits in with everything, but I personally don't see how, because I'm not understanding. And so I think a little bit more could have been done in those instances and I would have been fine. But honestly, it didn't really hinder my enjoyment, because it didn't hinder my my understanding of the big picture of what was happening. So it is a pretty small quibble for me. But overall, I really enjoyed this story. Um, Before I forget, content warnings though for this book is there's definitely death and grief and medical trauma and some other small um, things. So I will leave a link to Storygraph down below so you can check out what other readers have tagged as content warnings for this book if you are interested. But like I said, overall, I just really, really enjoyed this book, and I ended up giving it 4.5 stars. And I very much encourage, if anybody thinks that this sounds interesting, give it a shot. I mean, it's a novella. It won't take very long anyway, but I think that it is absolutely beautiful and just so interesting and very, very compelling. So, if you have read this book, if you are interested in reading this book and you want to come talk to me about it, leave me a comment down below. But that is all I have. So, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. And until next time, have happy reading, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!